Hi everyone, it's Allie from the donor team. I'm also here to answer any clinical questions if you have them. So feel free, if you're not a donor egg recipient, to chime in if you have any other questions I might be able to help you with. I tried to type a title in this video, but for some reason, when I type, it's coming out backwards. So if anybody has any IT experience that knows how to fix that, let me know. Oh wow, I see 20 people on already. That's awesome. So let me know where you're watching from, if you're watching the live or the rerun. I love to see the comments. As you can see, I'm doing this from home, and I think my background just fell over. So anyways, I'm going to get going. Hi, Sharonda. How are you? Oh, I see. I just had another failed cycle using donor eggs. Send me a message through your portal so I remember to follow up with you, please. I'll take a look at everything. Hi, Donette. So excited to see you guys on. Wow, 33 people. Oh, that makes me nervous. It's been a while since I've been on. It's been probably about a month. I run out of people, or I run out of things to talk about. I don't want to be too repetitive and boring, so I gave it a little time. I have already talked about a lot of things that I've made notes about, but I'm going to talk about these things anyway. Tanya, 31 weeks, that's amazing. Make sure you send me pictures. I love to see the results to all our hard work. I think that's great. All right, so first I'm going to talk about the sperm, because the sperm is very important, and so we have to think about the sperm, and we have to think about how the sperm is 50% of our results. And some important things. It is a great idea for everybody to have a semen analysis. So have your partners go for a semen analysis first when starting out this process. Oh, hey Jazz, how are you? So semen analysis, very important. When you freeze a sperm sample, we're looking at the count and motility. We're not looking at morphology. Morphology is like the shapes of those sperm and the way they swim. So that information is important. It might give us an idea as to how that sperm might act with an egg and how it might fertilize. If we know we're working with sperm that may be slightly compromised, that may give us an idea as to maybe how the fertilization is gonna, how it's going to fertilize the eggs. It's not 100%. When our embryologists are choosing their sperm, they're choosing the ones that look at the best quality, the ones that are swimming the best, so they're going to take the best of the best. They're not taking the ones that don't look good, but still it doesn't tell us chromosomally what's going on with those sperm. So semen analysis, very important. Don't skip steps. I realize that some of you are anxious to move forward and just want to get that sperm frozen, and maybe it's hard to ask our husbands or partners to provide that second sperm sample to freeze. They want to just get it all done at once, so their partners aren't stressed. But really, it's worth your money to get that semen analysis done, the full semen analysis, and then freeze on a separate occasion. You may see on those message boards some talk about overnight sperm kits. Those should be used as last resort only. We do require a payment up front, and I think currently it's $350. That price is always subject to change. I hate to quote prices in these videos because we do change our prices on occasion. But those overnight sperm kits, well, the reason that we want them to be used as a last resort is you're not freezing that sperm and then shipping it to us. You're getting that kit that has media in it, and you're putting your sperm sample in that media and then shipping it. Know how that temperature is regulated in the shipment. While maybe it's being sent in an insulated container, we can't keep that at a certain temperature. So we're getting some really great samples from those, and we're getting some samples that are not so good. And because we don't know how that sperm was treated in that shipment, we don't really know the quality. We can look at it, and quality is very subjective, but it doesn't mean, it's not going to really necessarily tell us how good that sperm is going to be for use during your cycle. So if you can avoid the sperm kit, and instead of paying $350 for the kit, pay $350 for your flight to come in and provide your fresh sample to freeze, that would be much better. I want to also talk about PESAs, when we have to go in and aspirate those sperm for use. I want you to know that the PESA sperm sample, it's not going through that normal process of ejaculation. So that PESA sperm sample may be compromised. It's not the best sperm sample. Those sperm may not be swimming the way a normal sperm sample would be. Sometimes they're just twitching, and so the embryologists do have to use some guesswork. They pick obviously the best of what they see, but it doesn't mean that it's going to fertilize your egg. So when using PESA sperm, a couple of things to think about. While we do freeze PESA sperm, it is always best to use a fresh sample with each cycle. And to maybe consider purchasing additional eggs with your donor egg package. You really don't want to limit the number of embryos you have to transfer if you can at all help that. So think about purchasing additional eggs to increase the number of embryos and increase your chances at getting a really good quality embryo to transfer. Karen, hi, Allie. First appointment with Dr. Kiltz today. That's great. Message me after your appointment. I'll reach out to you if you're looking for donor eggs, and I can get you some information. Let's see, the process of monitoring for FET, but my lining was 6.2. Your third appointment, I'll be going back tomorrow, worried it won't be where it needs to be. So our goal for your uterine lining for frozen transfer is 8 to 10 millimeters. It's important to keep in mind that it's a goal, it's a guideline, and it doesn't mean that if your lining will only get to 7 that you won't get pregnant. 7 used to be our guideline. We wanted it 7 millimeters or above. We found 8 to 10 might be a little bit better, but still I'm happy with a 7. I've seen pregnancies at a 4 and a 6, so don't lose hope, keep trying. Back to the sperm. So I was talking about PESA, fresh PESA, purchase additional eggs, and we can use frozen as a backup, but have me check with the lab. If you have frozen PESA sperm, have me check with the lab and see what they think about the count and the motile sperm that was found there before it was frozen. They're usually a really good judge of whether we should consider a fresh sample if you're trying to use that frozen. There's a lot of talk about a mock cycle, and some of the doctors at your consult will recommend a mock cycle. The great thing about doing that mock cycle ahead of time is that a mock cycle, basically, let me explain this. It's a test to see how your uterine lining responds to estrogen. And so the mock cycle is basically you call day 1 of your period, you go in for a day 3 baseline ultrasound blood work. If you don't get a period, I just plan your baseline. I want to make sure your uterine lining is thin, hormone levels are low. And if that's the case, then I'll start you on estrogen. We send you back for a ultrasound and blood work 7 to 10 days after your estrogen is started. If your lining has thickened appropriately, your mock cycle is complete. It's a good idea to do these mock cycles to make sure your lining, before you go and purchase eggs, will actually thicken appropriately for a cycle. However, I don't require every recipient to do a mock cycle. If we're creating and freezing embryos, I always say it's up to you. You don't need to have that done because we're not on any time restrictions. The mock cycle is required when you're trying to do a fresh egg cycle with a fresh embryo transfer. We need to know how much estrogen and how long it takes to prepare your lining for a transfer for when the donor is ready for her egg retrieval. We want to know we can prepare you in time for your transfer when the donor is ready for her retrieval. So if that makes sense, I know I'm jumbling my words. I get super nervous doing these live videos when I'm away from it for so long. When I do them weekly, it becomes like part of the everyday thing, but I've been away from it, so I'm nervous, sorry. Let me talk about waiting lists a little bit, because waiting lists are an ongoing conversation. We're at our all-time low with donors right now. We are working every day on getting new donors into the program. I know Molly Valenti, she's been working on really reaching out to some of previous donors that maybe didn't come back for another cycle, but still could do 4 or 5 more cycles. And she's working on reviewing applications and getting donors in for their testing. And so she's working hard on that. I can't tell you when she puts new donors into the program. It's kind of sporadic. Once lab results are in, and they're different for every donor, we put them up as active if they're okay to move forward. And so they typically, I believe, are showing up in the morning, is what I hear from some recipients out there. We do have waiting lists for a lot of our donors, so if they're marked currently matched, they likely have a waiting list. I can put you on up to 3 waiting lists at a time. And so once a donor does become available to you, then I send you a message through the portal with a text attached telling you that the donor is available. I'm now going to give you 48 hours to make your decision. There are so many recipients out there, so few donors. We need to move the process along. And so if you're not sure about a donor and you can't make that decision quickly, we really do have to be fair to all our recipients and move on to the next on the list. Once you're matched with a donor, we do reserve the right to remove you from other waiting lists. So that we're opening spots for other recipients, okay? Waiting lists are a, what's the word I'm looking for? They're a courtesy that we're offering to take the stress off of waiting and wondering. And so as long as you're on some waiting lists, that's great. You maybe don't have to worry about checking back so often about those donors. What else do I want to say about waiting lists? Do you guys have any questions about waiting lists that you're posting? Let me take a look. Okay, no waiting list questions that I can see. Okay, moving on my list. I did write down to talk about meds. PRP is still big. If you've heard about that, it's platelet-rich plasma. It's something that we typically do 1 to 3 days prior to transfer. But if you're using it to help thicken your uterine lining, like my girl that talked about her lining not getting thick enough, maybe you want to consider coming into our office for a platelet-rich plasma infusion. They draw 4 vials of your blood, they spin it down, and then take that clear plasma out. And we infuse that into the uterus, kind of like an intrauterine insemination. And so that has said to help with the uterine lining, making it thicker. If we're doing it 1 to 3 days before transfer, it's to help with implantation. So maybe you should consider that. I believe it's $300. Don't quote me on that, but that'll at least give you a price to get started. Contact the financial department for exact pricing. They will be able to help you with that. Okay, and HCG wash is still very popular. I'm not sure of the current pricing on that. I know the medication itself is usually about $100. 1 to 3 days prior to transfer, we can mix it with the PRP and infuse it that way, or we can do it separately. And that's really did a little study on that, and he believes that it does help with implantation. Intralipid infusion, that's usually done 5 to 7 days prior to transfer, but we will often do it either the day before or on transfer day for our traveling patients, because we know it's hard to get this done near home. So intralipid infusion is said to have immunologic effects and maybe help your body from fighting off the embryo. So something to consider with your cycle protocols as well. Dr. Kiltz and I came up with a really good standard protocol for our recipients, but these extras are always available, so feel free to ask me about them if you are interested in adding them. And there's nothing to say that you need these extras. That's why I typically like to order my standard protocol, and then if there is some issues with implantation down the road, we can add those extras. But if you want to be proactive and add them right off the bat, and you're willing to spend the extra money to do that, that's absolutely fine. I'm happy to do that for you. Okay, I'm going to stray from my list, and I just want to take a look. I see that Melissa is on. Melissa is the other recipient coordinator. We work close together, and she is on, and I know she has answered some questions. What if we bring in our own donor that we know? Okay, we do have that option. You can bring in a known donor. In fact, because we're so low on anonymous donors, if you have a friend or family member that's willing to do that, that is a great option. For currently $9,000, you can bring in your known donor. That covers her meds, her egg retrieval, assisted hatching, ICSI, and embryo transfer, freezing of any leftover embryos if they're freezable, and storage for up to a year. You can elect to do a fresh embryo transfer or create and freeze. Most people are creating and freezing embryos. And we're typically freezing those on either day 3 or day 5, depending on fertilization and how they're developing. And then they come back and do their frozen transfer when it's a little bit more convenient. We can certainly be more flexible on dates and work around your schedule. So bringing in your known donor, the benefit to that is you get all the eggs from that egg retrieval. So you'll likely end up with more embryos than should you use one of our anonymous donors. But it's important to know that your known donor, you want to really look at their age, their BMI, their overall medical history, their health, their general health. You want to bring in somebody that maybe is like one of our egg donors, so that you can get a good outcome. Our egg donors are between the ages of 20 and 32. So if you're bringing in a known donor and she's close to 40 years old, I'm not sure that your success is going to be even close to what our anonymous donor cycle success would be. So just a few things to think about. Let me scroll down here. Oh, and Melissa, she was probably typing as I was talking. Thanks for getting back to her on that. You sent my chart asking for a referral for husband's morphology. Nicole Renee, if you want to message me, I can put a lab requisition in your partner's portal for a full semen analysis. If we get a lot of eggs, can we only inseminate some that we can donate extra eggs if not needed? You can choose. You can decide how many eggs are injected with sperm with any donor egg package or known donor package. Depending on the number of eggs you get and maybe their quality, and if you're using a known donor and if they meet our donor criteria, you could potentially donate those to the program. You can donate those to another recipient. These are all possibilities, but it's on a case-by-case basis, so you really need to reach out to us individually, and we can tell you what your options are. But I have had clients inject only, let's say, 3 or 4 eggs. But I do have some reservations about limiting the number of eggs you inject, because we don't know how those eggs are then going to fertilize. I would hate to see you inject only 3 eggs, freeze 3 eggs, and then maybe end up with only 1 fair quality embryo to transfer. However, I do understand that people have reservations about banking embryos and having to make decisions later on about what to do with those embryos. I completely understand that, but I also want you to be successful. The egg freezing is a great viable option nowadays, but it's important for you to know that when you freeze eggs, it's only 1 cell that we're freezing. And so they may not survive the thaw. So it's very important for you to really think about the number of eggs you're freezing. If you're only freezing 3 eggs, you may end up with 1 or 2 eggs that survive that thaw, and you may not even end up with an embryo. So if you have a large number of eggs, let's say that we retrieved from a known donor, and let's say there's 20 eggs and you only want to inject 8 or 10, it is reasonable maybe to freeze the remainder of those. But if you have a low number of eggs, I really wouldn't like to see you do that. I just want you to have good results. Veronica, thank you for your comments. Do you have to order the HCG wash or PRP or embryo glue through the pharmacy, or can it be ordered? Let me see. I just want to make sure I'm not overlapping with Melissa. All right, so HCG you do have to order for the wash. PRP and embryo glue are something that the PRP is from your own blood, so we're going to draw your blood when you come to the office, but you do need to schedule that appointment for the PRP. Embryo glue is an additive to the media that we thaw your embryos or prepare your embryos for transfer. So you want to tell us at the beginning of the cycle that you want embryo glue, because it's not something that can just be added on day of transfer. It has to be added to that media dish when they're preparing to thaw your embryos ahead of time. Or when they're preparing the dishes for your egg retrieval. So it's very important, if you want embryo glue, to let us know that and be very clear on your wishes. All right, so I think that, I'm not sure how to say this, Gaytree Sharma, how would you know if you need these added to your protocols? I think you are talking about the PRP, HCG wash, and embryo glue. I'm not sure. So if that's what you're talking about, oftentimes we don't know if you absolutely need these. These are extras that we can add in. It's definitely recommended for those that have had failed implantation or prior cycles that maybe ended in a biochemical or a miscarriage. It's nice to be able to add things like the HCG wash, intralipids for those that have had miscarriages or failed implantation for sure. And there's some other meds. So if you do want to inquire with me about what I think should be added, I can look at your history and I can help you. And certainly, if you want a doctor's opinion, I've worked for Dr. Kiltz for 10 years, so I do know what his criteria are. I'm very familiar with that. And I can help you with that. But if you prefer to talk to a physician, please contact the office and schedule your follow-up talk. Let's see. Cost for an IVF, you're going to have to contact the financial team for that because we do change the pricing. I don't want to quote it here. What if we share the donor's eggs? Is there a discount instead of $9,000? All our donor packages are considered shared packages with the exception of the known donor. And so they are already, those prices are already discounted and appropriate for our center. If you go outside our center and look at some of the other prices, you're paying $30,000 for a donor egg cycle in some cases. So if you compare us to others, we're already discounted. So right now it's 6 fresh eggs to create and freeze embryos for $9,000. Okay, so what testing or suggestions do you have for male factor? My hubby has a good count, but morphology was 3% normal. Sarah, thanks for your question. So actually the 3% normal morphology is good. I'd rather see 3% over 1%. Likely if his count is fine, they're going to find, let's say, a dozen normal sperm to use. But to help improve, if you go to Theralogics.com, there is a good vitamin to help with any male factor issues. So get him on a vitamin. It does take about 3 months to really take effect, but better late than never. Get him started, and it's Theralogics.com. Let's see who else. Is the percentage rate for success with IVF lower for couples diagnosed with primary unexplained infertility? I don't really know how to appropriately answer that question. Success is really, I base, when I quote somebody a success rate, I base that on statistics. And statistics are usually based on age and how many embryos are transferred. And so if you want to take a look at statistics, go to SART.org. And you can look up the national data there, and that'll at least give you a guideline, not considering your overall history. So there are things that can affect your success, uterine abnormalities or sperm, abnormal sperm count or morphology. So it is, you have to consider all factors, but at least to look at the age factor, you can go to SART.org and have a look there. What are the risks to PGS testing embryos made from frozen eggs? This, when people ask about doing PGT testing with frozen eggs, let me talk to you first about the frozen eggs. So again, I had said earlier in this video that it's only one cell that we're freezing and thawing. So if you can imagine, it's one delicate cell. And so with a package of eggs, frozen eggs, we do expect to lose some. We don't want to lose any in the freeze thaw. We try to take extra special care, but it is likely that you'll lose some in the thaw. So you're already starting with a lesser quantity once you thaw those eggs, and then you're injecting them. Our hope is that 85% or more fertilize. So depending on the number of embryos, typically with banked egg cycles, I like to take extra special care of those banked eggs. And so any embryos that result, I like to transfer those on day 3. However, there is a lot of talk about PGT testing and freezing on day 5. I want you to have a transfer. Between days 3 and 5, an embryo has to go through a media change, and that can stress the embryo. And so, and these are all things that I'm sharing that I have learned from our embryologists. And so stressing the embryo, we may lose some by day 5, 6, or 7 when they need to be biopsied. And so when you're using banked eggs, you may start with a lower number of eggs to inject, end up with a lower number of embryos, and then losing some between days 3 and 5. You may be very limited with the number of embryos that we have to biopsy. Therefore, you don't know what those PGT results are going to be. You may not end up with a normal embryo. So for best results, I would recommend that you start with fresh eggs. Increase your number of overall embryos to biopsy at the day 5 or 6, 7, whenever they're ready to be biopsied. You're going to improve your overall chances that way. But anytime you remove a chunk of cells for a biopsy of an embryo, I believe that there has to be some damage to that embryo and some effect on implantation. So that's my thoughts. I'm not an embryologist. I'm a registered nurse. I've been working with Dr. Kiltz for 10 years now. And so I have learned a lot from the embryologists and Dr. Kiltz and their thoughts on that. 2 failed transfers from Eugenia. I have 3 embryos left. Do I recommend ERA and what other test? Well, if you haven't added some of those extra medications to your protocol, I would suggest talking to one of us about adding some medications. Definitely PRP if you can do that. If you haven't checked your uterine cavity in over a year by an HSG, saline, sono, or hysteroscopy, I would recommend you maybe consider a hysteroscopy. Let's get in there, look at the uterine cavity, and make sure everything's healthy to proceed with your next transfer. The ERA testing, what I'm finding, a lot of the results that we're getting are consistent with the endometrial receptivity is good with our normal protocol that we follow. The occasional person may need an extra day of progesterone. And so it's a lot of money to spend on a test that may not give you any more information than you already had. But you know what, if you're at the end of your rope and you really need to look and see, if you need to do something to try to change your outcome, then great, move forward with that ERA testing. I can tell you that it's close to $1,000 at the end of the day, and again, it may not give you any new information. So that's all I have to say about that, and I think that I've been on for almost a half hour. I'm going to close for now, and I'll try to log in again for another live next Thursday. So bring your questions, and I'll take a look at the questions that I didn't answer here, and I'll come up with some new topics for next week. So have a great weekend, everybody, and happy fall.